Welcome to Educational Alpha. Kaya CEO and host Bill Kelly brings you on-the-ground conversations with business leaders, educators, coaches, and industry colleagues from around the globe. In this episode, Bill catches up with David Lee, professor of social sciences at Singapore University, whose professional career could be described as a diverse portfolio. From his early days as a hedge fund manager to researching Bitcoin, crypto, and blockchain technology, to an educator of fintech and social impact, David's career spans decades of continuous movement toward the forefront of investment and technology. Listen in.
Welcome to the latest edition of Educational Alpha, where the investor's edge starts with informed consent. I'm your host, Bill Kelly, and today I'm joined by David Lee. David, great to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you, Bill, as well.
And I guess, we've got the cameras on. The listener won't see us, but we were just talking a moment ago. It has been quite some time. I don't think I've been to Singapore in 5 years, and you and I maybe caught up virtually right during the beginning of COVID. So it's going to be good for the listeners and great for me to find out a little bit about what you're up to. But maybe start a little bit with your background. And you are like a diverse portfolio. You've done a lot of things. So maybe try to give us maybe the 2 to 3 minute version as opposed to the 2 or 3 hours, which your gravitas deserves.
Yeah, it's great to be talking to you, Bill. It's been a while. As always, happy to be involved in Kaya. I'll just give a short background. I started early on in my career as a hedge fund manager back in the 1990s. And I retired from hedge fund in 2012. And in between, I worked as CEO of a couple of listed companies as well. I was involved in long short in the earlier days. And then I moved on to macro and finally to REITs, and then became a property developer as well. A wide range of activities as I was moving into, but I have always wanted to move to the forefront of investment. And when I ran out of ideas, I went back to the university in 2012 to Singapore Management University and became a professor and started doing research in Bitcoin, crypto, blockchain. And then I moved on to Singapore University of Social Sciences, and that's where I'm now. But I'm involved in quite a few universities in Singapore, in Shanghai, and I'm basically I view myself as a researcher in the area and educator in the area of fintech and social impact. And more importantly, I think I view myself as an ecosystem builder. So I'm involved in like British Blockchain Association of Singapore, Global FinTech Institute, and a whole lot of organization that trying to build an ecosystem for the fintech industry.
So, David, I do remember early in my tenure, which goes back almost 10 years, and our mutual friend Peter Douglas first introduced the two of us over, I think, a lunch, or maybe I was out on your campus. And I came away thinking David Lee, very, very smart, very, very humble. And it's sort of summarized on your LinkedIn profile. And I've always remembered that you write at the very top where you're describing yourself, just learning and sharing, which I think is a great tagline. But I want to go back to when you were in the classroom and you brought a lot of practical skills. But if I think about what an academic would have to say on their LinkedIn profile, it's just sharing and shaping. And I would hate to be an academic right now because the pace of change is enormous, and we're not trying to teach these kids sort of the what's in the history book, because the history is history, and the future and their job requirements and the skills needed are changing so very rapidly. And then ChatGPT comes in as well to maybe gum up the works a little bit more. But what is the future of maybe your prior life or current life in academia, and how do we do the very best job to shape these future leaders into a great uncertainty and a tremendous pace of change?
Well, I was thinking that the first industry that was going to be disrupted was financial institutions and then education. But I'm surprised how resilient the education industry is. And in the last 2 years, I sense that most of the education institutions are changing much faster than I've anticipated. I've seen a lot of different new courses coming out and new degrees coming out, especially during the COVID. Now we can see a lot like Master of FinTech,
This
university do have like I said, the university do have a very difficult job because it's moving very fast. And previously, university respond very slowly because we have a lot of academic council, we have layers and layers. But over the last 2 years, I found that those barriers are breaking down.
Well, this concept of privacy and proper ethical behavior, and there's a fiduciary standard we all should be operating within. And I think this is an interesting door that you've opened. And we had some conversations with you, David, when we began the FDP Institute and the FDP credential that Kaya launched a little bit before COVID, 2018 or so. And Hossein and I had consulted with you. And we had thought initially that maybe we could bolt this on to the Kaya program, but it was a different and deeper set of studies. And that's why Kaya began in the first place, because we couldn't pay lip service to all. So we had to go very, very deep. And then I think maybe a tipping point for us for this FDP credential was the concept of ethics and privacy. And you could get a very interesting data set, but is it yours to take? Is there differential privacy in place? Is it anonymized? And who gave the data to the data provider? What fed that data in the first place? So it's a very, very complex web. And I'm not sure in Singapore, but in the US, we do not have a national definition of privacy. So we're kind of wandering around a dark room. And when the lights come on, we may find the SEC codifying regulation based on actions I took 2 or 3 years ago. So maybe any comment on that would be great. And I do want to talk about the role of regulation and maybe legislation too, because I think we as professionals are kind of on the leading edge as to how to use this data. And I think we have to use it in a very, very responsible way, which when you get an industry of very smart capitalists, sometimes it's hard to restrain them.
Yeah, I think we should work together a lot more in that area because I think the ethics is the most important. And the issues that you raise, for example, in Singapore, we have so-called the FEED principle. So it has to be fair, equitable, accountable, and transparent. So if you are any financial institutions in Singapore with a license will have a technology risk committee formed from a subset of the board of directors. And then from this technology risk management, you have to look at how your data are being stored, where are they being stored, who has the access to them. The fines are quite heavy, like you say, but this is after the action. But it is how you design the whole process and governance of the coding itself, the program itself, the data protection that leads to privacy protection or invasion, which are important. So there are some guiding principles that we work on, but a lot of responsibility falls onto the board of directors to ensure that you have to. We have so-called Privacy Data Act. Every university take it very seriously. You have a set of data that you're using. You have the contractor or vendors that serve you. They must have the same standard, and so on. There are a lot of guiding principles that people are using now to do that. But having said that, there are two areas to think about. One is that we can have all these processes and we can create a so-called zero trust environment, meaning anyone that come into my office, anyone that come to my network, I'm an administrator, I've done all the due diligence to ensure that you are not a malicious element. But however, after I admitted you into my office or my network, human as such is about behavior. If the right incentives come along, like you say, the capitalists, whatever, then they may become malicious. So that it's important then to have a trustless mindset as well, in the sense that yes, we trust all those people that we're admitted in, but sometimes things may just happen without us expecting it will happen. So why don't we have a trusted environment in the sense that we use the technology as well to ensure that the trust is distributed, and also to ensure that not one person holding the key, like a nuclear weapon, right? There are a few people, there are many layers of checks, so that the person who has his own data, they should be in charge of the safety of his own data. But it also introduced another set of problem. What if I forget my key or my password to the data set? Then that's where that's what learning is about. Then we see a lot of shortcomings of all these ideas, and then you'll find that people will start to create multi-computing wallet to ensure that new type of custody that will come on and custodize the fraction or the password or the key, which is very interesting. I think in Singapore, this is what we are looking into in all areas, in the sense that we have sandbox, we have people who are not afraid in the regulation and the universities of trying new things. And then when we encounter new problems, we find solutions for it. So I think that is how Singapore tackles some of these problems, which I think not every country has the confidence to do that. But being a small country, I suppose a lot more easier for us.
Well, and of everything you just said, one string I want to pull on is the role of the board of directors. And I agree with everything you said. And I think to oversimplify it, if I'm sitting in the seat of management, I'm responsible for managing the risks of that business. When I cross the table to a director role, I'm overseeing those risks, not managing them. But if those risks get more complex and the list gets longer and they're changing very, very rapidly, as a director, I'm overseeing something I may never have seen in the course of my career, and fairly or unfairly, and the VC space far better than I do. There was a lot of criticism of SBF and FTX and what happened there, and a lot of it came back to the governance structure was awful. Oftentimes in the venture space, it is a man or a woman with a dog and a computer and a good idea, and it's maybe gotten a little bit more complex. But the next door neighbor or the lawyer is going to be the board member, and that founder's probably on the board too. So how do we deal with the evolution of a governance structure that's got to get in there early? It's got to be independent, but most importantly, it's got to be smart.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. A lot of people in finance, like all of us who are in financial institutions, we may have a lot of knowledge about finance itself, how fund is being raised, we do risk management, but it's financial risk management, operation risk management. But when technology comes, it's a total different game altogether. So the tech side is exerting a lot of fiduciary duties on the board of directors. And one way is to bring awareness, the other is more education. But it is never easy because the board can be the best is that the board is diverse, but sometimes board may be focusing a lot on finance, and then the technology comes around, and hacking happens all the time. Malicious element on the internet is something that's very common, and the board do have a lot of problem in dealing with that. Of course, they have the CTO, they have the big fours or consultancy firm helping them to do their annual technology risk audit report and so on, which help to look at the whole processes and including how you can log and so. But increasingly, what I'm seeing is that a lot of cloud company and a lot of technology company, they are actually incorporating the processes into the hardware as well. So when you sign on to a cloud services, actually the entire process is already very much embedded in there. So the chances of you having some of the issues may be reduced, but of course can never be totally eliminated. But I suppose as a board is about doing your best and to ensure that you perform your due care about the entire process, and I think that's important. So as educator, is therefore very important for us to having. It's very different when you talk about fintech, right? For example, fintech as a computer scientist, or fintech as a finance professor, or fintech as an investor. Because from the computer science, they're looking at the hardware, they're looking at the environment, they're looking at the software. They will never think about a lot of other things that is linked to the finance side. And from the finance side, a lot of times we never think about the technology. We just say, why don't you get the platform up and running? Why don't you start trading? It's a crypto exchange. Why don't you start engaging in the business? Why don't we venture into DeFi as a company? Why don't we start to use wallets and so on? But there are a lot of technology risk that's embedded in all the smart contracts. There are bugs in there. Even the hardware, you could be in a trusted executable environment, but there's still a lot of issues that have not been resolved because they're so nascent. So as a board of directors, you've got to go in with your eyes open. It's not that you won't venture into those areas, but at least in the board meeting, you have to discuss about them and then demonstrate your knowledge that, hey, we do know that these are the problems and these are the mitigating factors that we have designed. So if things happen, how do we respond? How do we write a report? And surely the regulators will come after you and say that, what have you done? And you dig out all the board meetings and so on, that you just got to ensure that on the one hand, you have to be innovative and get new businesses. On the other hand, you have to make sure that you don't score your own goal, or the risk management side is very important. So the board, in balancing the risk and the opportunity, becomes very important, and therefore I emphasize that it's important, like what Kaya has, all the courses in the AI and stuff, that people should take those courses and discuss about it, a lot more conferences, and get themselves tuned up to the latest technology that they need to know.
Well, certainly, I'm not going to argue that point, David, with Kaya and the role that we can play. But maybe just sort of bringing this to some form of a conclusion. If I think about the role of a director or the role of a professional, and they're listening to this or struggling as to how do they embrace a very different future. Yeah, I think it's hard because you said a lot of these areas are nascent, and I absolutely agree with that. And not only are they nascent, it's sometimes a question from the outside looking in: what is sustainable? What is really, if I have to find an entry point, what should I think about? And no scientific study, but if I looked at Twitter and saw what was trending over the last couple of years, I may find one month it's Web3, and then the Internet of Things, and then maybe the metaverse, and then SBF is thrown in there, ChatGPT now, distributed ledger. The list goes on, and then Sandbox and NFTs and Beeple. So, from my standpoint, I try to embrace this distributed ledger. I think that's the guts, the plumbing, the hardware, and everything has to be built off that. And if I think about the industry that I grew up in over 4 decades, the mid and back office is the stage on which everything else sits. So that's kind of my entry point if I want to be a student of this space. I can't understand all of these things, but if I can understand it through that lens, if I hear something, I can build upon that. What would be your advice as to somebody that's thinking about, you hear all these acronyms and all these crazy things, and how do I get myself engaged? And it's got to be continuous learning, no doubt, but it would be good to hear your views on that.
Yeah, for me, it may not be suitable for everybody. I use the core satellite asset allocation strategy. So I do have, say, for example, 90% into the assets which I'm very familiar with, but I will take out about 10% to go for 100 companies, knowing that 90 of them will fail. And probably only about 10 will make it and sustainable. And 5 will give you supernormal return, but the other 5 will just be flat and they just continue to survive. Why do I do that? Because that's the only way that when you put your money where your mouth is, that you start learning. Because a lot of this new technology, they're moving so fast. And even people who invest in technology, they don't really know where this is heading. And because we're in investment, and for myself, I've been there for 30, 35 years or so, that we have a lot of experiences to more or less to see where all these are leading to. We have seen the dot-com bubble, we have seen tequila crisis, we have seen SARS, we have seen the Asian crisis, global financial crisis, and so on. So we are a lot more sensitive and investor into this area. But it will be very, I would say that the skill set that we can contribute not only to our investment portfolio but to the society as well is to get involved, right? If it's gambling, it is about drugs, it is about clear cut, pornography. Obviously, the answer is no. But if it's a technology is neutral. It is about human behavior to make it good or harmful. So we got to be there early as investor for two reasons. One is that for the satellite portfolio, you need to be there as the first mover to understand how this landscape is going to affect the other 90% of your core portfolio, because there is going to be very disruptive and it could be an industrial revolution. So in order to protect your 90% of portfolio, you've got to spend the 10% out there and invest in 100. And it's difficult to explain to investors, I invested in 190 fail, because by the time you have 30 or 40 fail, you'll be fired from your job. But you've got to gain the confidence of the investor and say that if we don't do that, we cannot be at the forefront of investment. We do not know how our own portfolio will be affected. So I'm going to be there. I'm going to learn about it. And then I believe that, having been investing for so long, I'm sure I can identify 5 of 100. My success rate will be better than anyone in the market to do that. But in the process of building the staircase, and a lot of them, we will just step on them, but they have no value for us in the portfolio. But without those staircase, we will never reach the plateau where we see the greenery that we are all targeting. So we have to put the money where our mouth is and say that, hey, this is good and this is bad. But in order to say that, because what disappoint me the most is that a lot of people haven't written a line of code of smart contract, and they say that, oh, I'm not going to get involved in smart contract. I think crypto is a scam, But I would respect somebody a lot better who say that I've been involved in smart contract for a long time, but I think crypto is a scam. I will listen, right? But you have not written a single line of code. You don't even know how smart contract is being put on the test net, and you tell me it's a scam, I will discount it 90%, right? Because I have investment experience as well, but I tell you that they are not, So I think as investors and educator and as business person, as a board of directors, We have to take the attitude that we have to go out there. And more importantly, we need to know what's the impact of this on the society. And a lot of us, not only in our own job, we are probably, in a better position to help the rest of the world. We've got to understand all this technology and ensure that when we know the impact is bad, we've got to speak out, right? We got to say something about it. But in order to say something, meaningful and also say something that really will happen, then we have to get involved. So that's my own view. I'm sure not everybody agrees with me, but that's the kind of attitude that I take, that have no fear, go out there, take a look, and see how much we can learn. But the ultimate motive is to create jobs and ensure that people are protected.
So, David, I started with learning and sharing. You lived up to your credo. You shared a lot. I learned quite a bit, and I'm sure the listeners will too. So, thanks for your sage advice, and I look forward to seeing you when I'm in Singapore later this year.
Likewise, I really look forward to having a good dinner with you and continue our conversation as always.
Outstanding. Thank you, David. Please join us on the next segment of Educational Alpha as we look to always put the investor first through transparency, education, and informed consent.